The mall is one of the most expansive places in the capital wasteland. It's here where we find many points of interest, one of which is found if we walk west of the Washington Monument. If we head to the southern side of the reflecting pool and continue west, we eventually go down a long escalator to find a metal gate to Hazmat disposal site L5. Inside, we go down an escalator, loot a vending machine where we can find some Nuka-Cola, to arrive in a metro tunnel. Most of this is blocked off, but heading through a door to the south, we can go down some stairs until we find a utility door.
Hey. Can't stand the sight of your own blood?
Ghouls. Well, I suppose we shouldn't be surprised to find ghouls on a place called a Hazmat disposal site. We're in some sort of utility tunnel, and we see a giant hole in the wall to the south. This appears to lead to some sort of cave. But taking a look at our local map, we see that the room we're in continues onwards to the east. So before we go through this tunnel, let's finish exploring this room. We see piles of toxic waste to the northeast. I guess we shouldn't be surprised to find barrels of nuclear waste disposed of so close to such a major metropolitan area. Our path brings us east, down some stairs into the next room, and rounding a corner, a feral ghoul reaver. Oh. One. I'm nervous using these powerful weapons so close to my companions. As they are mortal, I don't want to hit one and kill them. In this room, we find the body of a mercenary. As is typical, so many venture into the tunnels, but so few survive. We find some stairs leading down to a bottom level, and wait. Oh! Looking up, we see a Mark 7 turret, but it appears to be deactivated, so we'll leave it alone for now. We open a utility door to the east, and peering right, nothing like a little sneak attack. In this room, we find a terminal. This is the turret control system, and it's locked with a hard lock. After hacking it, we don't find any lore, but we find an option to control the nearby ceiling-mounted turrets. As soon as we turn them on...
That's it! That's it! That's the end of that.
Almost forgot about the one we just passed. We had to take it out. Creeping south, we can get rid of the other turret we activated.
Keep firing.
And then head through a door into a cave. We see a network of girders spanning this cave, and we realize that this wasn't just some abandoned tunnel that they dumped a bunch of waste into. This has structure. Pre-war America really built this up, adding all of these girders to reinforce the cave and the turrets to prevent trespassers. They deliberately planned to bury toxic waste so close to the Capitol. We see from our local map that this is a round room with an opening to the west. But as we get ready to explore, we catch the attention of another ghoul.
Where?
And then more from the west.
Bring it!
With the ghouls dead, we see that there are actually two paths out of here, a path to the west and a path to the south. We'll start by going south. This leads to another large cave filled with toxic barrels. This room also has a path to the west, where we find even more ghouls.
Hey. Hey. Damn it.
Whew, I tagged dog meat there, but thankfully he still survived. Taking a look at our local map again, we see that the girders continue on to the south, but I'm beginning to think that these western paths may connect. So let's finish exploring this cave system before moving forward. Heading west, we see a large rock that goes up to the ceiling. From here, we could leap upon some of these girders, but there are so many stalactites we can't walk anywhere. So back on the ground, we can continue west. We find the body of a raider at the base of a metal staircase leading up. This connects to a catwalk, which turns north. One of these pipes must have been leaking a flammable gas. Thankfully, we attacked from a distance and didn't get harmed by it. In this room, we see two paths forward. A little path going around a rock to the northeast, and then a slope going north. But first turning west, we find the corpse of a wastelander with chems on his inventory next to a red toolbox. Taking a look at our local map, we see that both paths appear to connect to tunnels we've already visited. We'll go up the ramp to the north first, and sure enough, this leads us to that crumbling wall that we saw at the beginning. Alright, so we've made that connection. Heading back, we can now turn northeast, and we see that this path rounds a corner to the east, leading to that first room where we found all the girders. This leaves only one path remaining, and that's to follow the girders south out of a cave and into a tunnel. Heading through this final room, we find a ramp that leads us up. There are train tracks here and a subway car. We arrive in a new metro tunnel. Looks like it's all clear behind us, and both paths on either side of the car are blocked with rubble. So to continue, we have to go east up some stairs. This leads us to a utility hallway, and following the stairs all the way to the top... Oh no. Super mutants. He was standing in front of this door to the south, and opening it brings us to the metro terminal. Just outside, we see a baby carriage with a doll in it. Oh, and this is actually a rigged explosive. But thankfully, our explosive skill is high enough that we can disarm it. To the southeast, we find a mattress on the ground, which we can use to rest up if we want. But to continue, we need to head south, up a ramp, and exit through the gate to L'Enfant Plaza. On the other side, we creep up some stairs to find ourselves in a sprawling ruin. We don't see any enemies, however, so we can take a moment to get our bearings. To the northwest, we see a little bit of a relaxation area and a ramp leading to a sky bridge. It looks like there's a path off to the south and a path off to the east. We'll start by exploring this relaxing area. We see some tables and chairs laid out with minor consumables, a billiard table with a big pool of red blood on the ground nearby. Looks like whomever were enjoying this area are now dead. There's a refrigerator with a few beverages inside, and then against the western wall we find a Nuka-Cola machine. Here I got a Nuka-Cola Quantum. I want a better vantage point to look for enemies, so crawling up this ramp, we can ascend the sky bridge. Looking off to the south, we don't see much. I gave myself away. A super mutant saw me, and he comes for us up the other side of the ramp.
That's it.
And what's this? Is that a pyramid? We don't have too long to admire it. On the other side is a super mutant. Goodness, and then his buddy came. Well, the coast looks pretty clear for now. Heading down the ramp, we can loot the body. We see a camera on the side of this banister. On the ground floor, we can explore this glass pyramid. But the glass is all shattered, and we see that the inside is filled with rubble. There's no door, no hatch. Looks like there's no way to enter it, so it must just be there for decoration. We see a ruined building to the east, and it looks like there's a path through it. But heading south first to loot the super mutant bodies, we get the attention of some other mutants nearby. There's another path around the side of this skyscraper, and it is from there that they come for us. Oh no, a super mutant overlord! And Sharon just runs right up there. I like your tenacity, Sharon, but I really don't want to hit you. making sure his health is okay. Yeah, he's fine. Creeping southeast through the rubble, we can loot the bodies. Holy cow, that was a lot of them. And we find ourselves overlooking a street. It goes off to the south, and we see, are those shops? And it goes beneath an underpass to the north. Heading that way, we see something down there. Looks like a body. There's an earthen ramp that we can take to get there. Looks like it's a super mutant brute whom we did not kill. He must have been killed by whomever owned this shack. We don't find another body here, so it looks like its occupant decided that it was a bit too dangerous to live here and moved on, leaving all of his possessions. There's a chessboard on a box on a mattress covered in caps, but infuriatingly, we can interact with the bed to sleep on it, which makes looting each of these caps individually frustrating. After a while, I just gave up. There's a sniper rifle on the bed and an average locked steamer trunk. Inside, we just find some minor chems and aid. On a shelf nearby, however, we find a copy of U.S. Army 30 handy flamethrower recipes. Beneath this are 2 ammunition crates. We also find a combat helmet here, and if we lift up the wooden box, we find that it's hiding a tidy stash of grenades, frag grenades, and a pulse grenade. After looting some caps on the top shelf, we can continue by heading south down the road. But we find more super mutants.
Look what we have here. Where? Aha!
Well, I think that's it. We arrive at an intersection that goes 3 other ways. There's a path off to the east, looks like it's filled in with rubble, and we find a street sign. We see that this road is called Suffragette Way. Then this road continues off to the south, where it looks like we see storefronts, and then off to the west, which appears to be blocked with more rubble. We'll start by heading east, and we quickly realize that we've entered a bit of a shooting gallery. Super mutants can easily pick us off from the elevated areas to the side, and indeed, one tries. He was firing from a wrecked sky bridge that has crumbled into the street, and heading all the way to the east, we see that this road is completely blocked. We find no way up, so we have to continue on this street level. Heading back to the intersection, we could go south towards the shops or west. I think south is where I need to go, so I'm going to head west for now just to make sure we explore everything. Heading west, we see some stairs off to the right and a metro sign. But before heading up there, we can head to the far western side of this road, where we find super mutants hiding beneath a sky bridge. And the Overlord appears to be trapped in some rebar. We can take advantage of the situation to take him down with our alien captain's sidearm. Okay, maybe he wasn't completely trapped. After looting the corpses, we can explore back here, but there's really nothing here, just a bunch of girders, cement, and rebar. So this is a dead end. So turning around, we can head up those stairs and follow that metro sign. At the top, we find a Pulowski Preservation Shelter, and it says that it's occupied. But its occupant has long since died. We can loot a big book of science here, however, and a bottle of wine. Now that we're at the top, we'll go east. We see an ammo canister next to a cement pillar, and rounding the corner, we find a bunch of super mutant bodies. These are the ones we killed when we entered this section through the ruin by the glass pyramid. So that leaves the road towards the marketplace, the only place left to go. But there was a corner back this way that we didn't explore, so heading through the ruin, we can run west and then turn south around the corner. This leads to that crumbled sky bridge where those super mutants were hiding under. At the other end of the sky bridge is just a bunch of rubble. I wanted to see if I could maintain the high ground up here, but as we creep along the slip to the east, we find our path blocked with more rubble. It forces us back down to the road. So it looks like our only way forward is to head back to that intersection and take it south down the road. By this time, it was starting to get dark. The street lamps had all turned on, and I wanted to explore this place in the day. Turning right, we see a little bit of an alleyway next to this dumpster, a perfect place to to rest for the night. So waiting here until morning, we could go down this alleyway, but it looks like it's blocked down there. Though we do see a sign, hard to read from here. We'll be back in just a second. Heading back out to the street, we don't see any other enemies. Moving east, we can loot a Nuka-Cola machine right next to this picnic area. There's a garbage can and then a dumpster, but not much in either. So back out to the street, we can move south. And immediately our perception tells us that there's a super mutant off to the left. An overlord at a sniper's position. Thankfully, our Gauss rifle is perfect for these situations. We can knock him down, wait for him to stand up, and knock him down again. But before I could finish him off, we get charged from a super mutant master from the south.
Yeah? You want some of this?
Oh no! Are you okay? Oh, okay, he's fine. But then, the Overlord stops showing himself. Looks like he's hiding. We're gonna have to move forward to find him. There's a big sign out here. A Cuppa Joe. This was a regional coffee chain in the DC area. Sadly, the storefront is all boarded up. Moving forward and rounding a corner, we find another super mutant master.
Need some help with this one? Teach you to mess with me.
Okay, how does Sharon's magic shotgun not have really high spread at that range? He's using it as a sniper rifle. But hey, at least it's on my side. With the mutants dead, we can creep up the gravel path to the east, loot the corpses, but this is a dead end. We're in the ruined basement of a building, but there's no way out. But I really wanted to get this Overlord, so creeping up this cement ramp, we find him.
Bring it!
Goodness, and this guy had a Gatling laser. Glad I took him out before he could turn it on. Peering over the ledge, we find a Centaur. And then rounding the corner, we see that the road turns east. Sharon and Dogmeat got lost, and they ran all the way up there to find me again. But I don't want to explore down there just yet. Peering over the ledge, we see all those shops. From here, we see the sign for the nearby L'Enfant Cafe, and we can jump down to the road. Heading towards the cafe, we can loot the chunks of the super mutant master we killed and head inside. We find a dead raider wearing an Arclight helmet, and there's another dead raider on the countertop. Heading to the northeastern corner, we can loot a first aid box and 2 bottles of Nuka-Cola. Heading behind the counter, we find a dose of Psycho on a bottom shelf and another first aid kit in the broken refrigerator. The last thing we find is a mine box hiding in the corner behind the counter. With the cafe explored, we can head out. There was a Nuka-Cola machine next to that gravel path we missed earlier, and then nearby is Besnick's barber shop. But sadly, it's all boarded up. We can't go inside. But on the other side of this barbershop, we see a path that leads to that alleyway where we rested earlier. I was just about to leave when I saw a door in the side of the wall. And directly above it, that sign that we saw earlier. Madame JL's reading room for the discreet gentleman. Oh dear. Heading inside, we go down some stairs into a basement. We find ourselves in a darkened room decorated with Persian rugs and naked mannequins. In the northeastern corner, we find a reading nook with some books on a table next to a coffee machine. There's a first aid box on the bookshelf. And in the northwestern corner, we find a smoking nook with a cigar still lit after 200 years, which makes perfect sense. Next to this is a buff out, although I suppose a raider or a wastelander could have recently lit this. There are comfy pillows on the ground, but not a lot of books. I don't think a lot of reading went on in this corner. Heading behind the counter, we see a hard-locked safe in the brick wall and an average locked terminal. Hacking it however we don't find any lore, we can simply unlock the wall safe. Inside, we find a small stash of caps and a stealth boy. I wonder what that was used for in a place like this. On the ground, we find a skeleton. Likely the skeleton of Madame JLL herself. Above her on the countertop is a Mentats and 2 stim packs, an empty cash register, and 2 pieces of sexy sleepwear. Oh, you naughty pre-war America. But that's about it for the reading room designed for discreet gentlemen. Heading back outside, we can round the corner back out to the street. Oh, look at this. We totally missed this when we came by earlier. It's a tripwire. But what was it connected to? Well, since we didn't trigger it, we'll never know, but I think it's probably connected to a frag grenade trap inside this pipe. Back into the street, we can turn east. Looks like that's where we're supposed to go, because the western path is blocked with rubble, as is the southern path. So turning east, we walk up the road to a town square. We see townhouses and apartment buildings in this square. There's a building to the left. What's this? Capitol Post. Oh. That sounds like a newspaper. And it looks like the front doors are not blocked off. So heading inside, we arrive in a dark, smoke-filled room. We see that the floor is broken to the west, creating a rubble ramp down. And we find some rad roaches. There's another by the door to the north.
Help me.
And behind us is the receptionist desk. We see a very hard-locked wall safe embedded in this desk. And on top of the desk is an average locked terminal. After hacking it, we only find the option to unlock the safe. And inside we find a tidy stash of caps and 44 Magnum rounds and a scoped 44 Magnum. Turning around, we see a door next to that rad roach and that the wall is completely broken. Inside must have been the primary workroom for the journalists. Going in a counterclockwise fashion around the room, we discover that the first terminal is booby-trapped. We can activate the rear panel to disarm the trap. On the desk, we find a couple of frag grenades, and that's about it. On the next desk is a terminal marked Capitol Post Top Stories, January 11th, 2077. We learn this must have been the terminal for the chief reporter, or the lead editor here. Good morning, Chief. We find two entries. The first, Commies Crushed, Alaska Liberated, by Dorothy Proud, Capitol Post staff writer. In the late evening hours of January 10th, brave American Army forces launched an all-out offensive against the entrenched Chinese communist invaders in the beleaguered seaport of Anchorage, Alaska, destroying all opposition and finally liberating the city after more than 10 years of Chinese occupation. No red-blooded American can ever forget that terrible winter of 2066, when Chairman Cheng's commie cutthroats mercilessly invaded the icy extension of the United States in an unprecedented act of foreign aggression that sent shockwaves all the way back to our nation's capital. But the nightmare is finally over, and America, as the home of the brave, is once again the land of the free. We got to take part in the liberation of Anchorage, Alaska in the Operation Anchorage DLC, which I covered in a dedicated video that you can watch here. In the next one, Food Riots Rile the Feds, by Walter Streetbeat Monroe, Capitol Post staff writer. It would appear that Washington's tolerance for American social disorder has finally reached its breaking point. In a recent public statement, White House spokeswoman Warren Eccleston said, "Okay, Americans are hungry. We get it. Well, I've got news for you. Things are tough all over, people. The president himself has been forced to substitute cube steak for his nightly prime rib, and the only wine available is a detestable Chateau Montrose 2043. But does he whine? Does he take to the streets like a rabid red? So please, good people, please, wait in line, get your food, and then go home. We're Americans. We don't solve our problems with violence." So, there were riots in the streets of D.C. over food, just like in Boston, as we learned from the Boston Bugle building, which I covered in a video that you can watch here. This food shortage was a result of the resource wars caused by the dwindling stockpiles of fossil fuels. The next terminal is sadly destroyed, and the next table flipped over. But next to this, we find a terminal labeled Capitol Post Top Stories, June 3rd, 2072. Good morning, Chief. Oh. So they were all called Chief? Okay. Top story, U.S. to annex Canada, by Dorothy Proud, Capitol Post staff writer. In a move that is being widely viewed as both necessary and overdue, the United States military today declared that they will begin the immediate annexation of the country of Canada. The decision comes after a long and contentious relationship with the Canadian government that began shortly after the Chinese invasion of Anchorage, Alaska in the winter of 2066. The Canadian leadership at that time expressed its opposition to American troops passing through their country or traversing their airspace, but ultimately capitulated. Tensions with our neighbor to the north have only escalated since then, as the United States has found itself relying heavily on Canada's natural resources, including wood cultivated from the country's great timberland forests, to maintain the war effort against China. but it was a recent near sabotage of the Alaskan pipeline that finally tipped the American military's hand. "That was the last straw," said Buzz Babcock, commander of U.S. forces in Canada. "You know what's been stopping the Reds from pouring into downtown Juneau? American soldiers, that's what. And now we've got to worry about someone, Chinese, Alaskan, or otherwise, taking out the pipeline? I don't think so." Effective immediately, United States troops are beginning a complete takeover of all Canadian assets and resources. Little America is ours. But let's face it, it always has been. Oh, man, okay. I'd love to hear a reaction from my lovely Canadian neighbors watching this video right now. We love you guys. You're not America's hat, we promise. In the next one, development of superweapon confirmed by Walter Streetbeat Monroe, Capitol Post staff writer. In a startling turnaround from their previous policy of complete covert development, the United States Army has confirmed that they are indeed working on a new superweapon, one designed specifically to crush the Red Chinese invasion force and liberate occupied Anchorage, Alaska, once and for all. Speaking at an Army press conference at the Pentagon, General Constantine Chase stated, "No more secrets. The time has come to lay all our cards on the table so that the Chinese can see with their own eyes that we've got the winning hand." The United States is proud to announce that for the first time in history, General Atomics International and Robco have joined forces to create, for this great country, a superweapon that will leave every single yellow-bellied Red shaking in their commie booties. Unfortunately for our readers, that's as specific as Chase is willing to get. While he and the Army are ready for China to know the U.S. is developing a new weapon, they're not quite ready to divulge just what it is, or when it will be ready for deployment. All in due time, said General Chase. Rest assured, when this weapon is complete, liberty will come to Anchorage, and hell will follow. Well, pre-war Americans may not have known what that secret weapon was, but we do. If we've explored the Citadel at all, we know that it was in fact Liberty Prime. But sadly, the bombs dropped before Liberty Prime could ever be unleashed upon the communist Chinese. There is one more terminal on the final desk here. This is Capitol Post Top Stories, July 27th, 2052. Good morning, Chief. We find two entries. We'll start with "The United Nations Disbanded" by Dorothy Proud, Capitol Post staff writer. In a crushing blow to foreign relations and world peace, the United Nations yesterday was completely disbanded, leaving its member nations to fend for themselves in these trying times. Many had considered the United Nations the best hope for brokering a ceasefire between the European Commonwealth and the nations of the Middle East, but such an intervention is now impossible. In a somber press conference at the United Nations building in New York City, United Nations President Sakugama Okiri had this to say: "It is a sad day for the United Nations, sadder still for the world. An era of relative peace and prosperity has come to a tragic end. The resource wars are upon us, and in my humble opinion, the United Nations is needed now more than ever." Sadly, the world disagrees. Those nations that have not already moved out of the immense headquarters will have completely vacated the premises by the end of the week. Several organizations have already begun bidding on the prime real estate, but children's toy retailer Bumbelows seems determined to transform the building into their new East Coast superstore. Oh, there is something horrifying about seeing the United Nations turned into a toy store. In the final one, Pint-Sized Slasher, More Than a Myth by Walter Streetbeat Monroe, Capitol Post staff writer. What American child alive hasn't heard the story of the Pint-Sized Slasher, that diminutive demon in a clown mask who stalks and slashes the innocent residents of supposedly safe suburbia? It's just one of the many folk stories parents use to scare their youngsters into behaving themselves. Or is it? According to Germantown Police Chief Joseph Field, the Pint-Sized Slasher may be more real than many people would like to admit. After previewing the autopsy results of the Linden Street slayings, said Field, "We have confirmed that the force and direction of every knife wound are consistent with an attack from a much smaller assailant. A child, to be precise." Add to those sinister forensic findings this statement from Christopher Atkinson, the one surviving victim of the adolescent assassin, and it becomes clear that the Pint-Sized Slasher does indeed walk among us. The clown, he's gonna kill us all. Do you understand me? He stabbed my brother Sean right in the face. He killed my brother, the little clown. But assuming the Pint-Sized Slasher is indeed a real, tangible threat to the peace-loving residents of DC suburbia, one question remains. Why? What could possibly motivate a child to don a clown mask and murder innocent people in cold blood? We may never know. At least not until the miniature maniac is brought to justice. Until then, all we can do is lock our doors, kiss our children goodnight, and pray they live to see morning. Okay, in my video on Piper, I accused her of bad sensationalist journalism. But yeah, that was there before the apocalypse too, if these terminal entries are to be believed. The door to this room is locked with an average lock. We don't have to unlock it. We could go through the hole in the wall, but we could always unlock it for experience. After looting the nearby filing cabinets, we can hop down through that hole in the floor. Here we find 3 microfiche readers, which makes sense for a newspaper publisher, and in the adjacent room, we hear a rad roach. In this room, we find 2 empty boxes to the southeast with a first aid box, and lying dead on the ground is the decapitated remains of Gibson. But who is Gibson? He's not one of the writers for the Capitol Post. We don't see his name on any of the terminals, plus his body isn't decomposed yet. After 200 years, it would be. I assume, therefore, he must be a scavenger who found his way in here and got his head ripped off by a rad roach. On his corpse, we find Gibson's key and Gibson's scrap of paper. The scrap of paper reads, "Search the house." Search the house? What house? This is an office building, not a house. We don't see a house in here. What could this mean? This is actually an elaborate reference to Hideo Kojima's 1988 video game called Snatcher. In that video game, we find a man named Jean-Jacques Gibson decapitated with his head between his legs in the ruins of a factory. And upon his corpse, we also find a note that says, "Search the house." We'll follow up with this clue and finish connecting the dots to this reference in just a moment. But for now, we need to head out of the Capitol Post building and finish exploring the plaza. Heading into the town square, we see the ruined residential houses all around us, but off to the southeast we find another metro tunnel. Approaching it, we discover L'Enfant South. Outside the metro is another Nuka-Cola machine with Nuka-Cola inside, and the nearby chain gate leads to the irradiated metro. This metro connects to the Citadel, but we want to finish exploring the plaza first. Backing out of the metro steps, we can turn right to go around it. We see an alleyway off to the left, but all we find here is an empty dumpster. So turning around, we find 2 paths left, northwest, past the Capitol Post, or east. We see that the eastern path is mostly blocked off, but heading down to explore what's here, we find an alleyway with another empty dumpster. Oh, but what's this? We find a freshly dug grave on the other side of this crumbling wall. Inside the grave, we find ammunition, some Rad-X, and a note. Search party log number 1. Taking a look at it in our Pip-Boy. First time I've thought to update the log since leaving Canterbury. The guard at the Citadel wouldn't let us in, but said a scribe had given Cheryl the medicine at least 2 weeks ago and sent her along to the Rangers. From the sounds of it, Miles didn't make it as far as the Citadel. Damn shame. He was a good mutt. Still no sign of Cheryl. Rumors about the city are true. Place is a death trap. Mutants and psychos at every turn. Cheryl's tough enough, but I'm worried, especially with Miles missing. Emmett just about went to pieces the first time we ran into a Centaur. We should be able to reach the Ranger compound before sundown tomorrow. Kaya scouted ahead, and it looks like the coast is clear for now. With any luck, Cheryl's holed up with them, and we can start back home. Here lies Henry. Muties saw him going for water in the street. There was nothing we could do to help him. If anyone else has come looking for us, we'll leave word with the Rangers. This note begins the unmarked quest, searching for Cheryl. It points us towards the Ranger compound. We remember exploring the Ranger compound when we helped out Riley's Rangers, and we became a member of their group. But while we were there, we didn't see any sign of Cheryl. Perhaps we missed something. We'll have to head back that way in an upcoming video. But to finish exploring this plaza, we can turn around and head north down the street. Here we find a Centaur.
That's it.
Moving forward and turning left, we find ourselves looking through that big ruined skyscraper that we saw earlier. Turning around, we can loot the Centaur. We see a little gravel and junk-filled nook between these 2 buildings, nothing really here, and then piles upon piles of rubble. If we squeeze past this rubble pile, we arrive on that edge overlooking the eastern road that was a dead end. And here we can finally loot the corpse of that super mutant we killed. With that, we finish exploring L'Enfant Plaza, and now we need to search for Cheryl. But first, we gotta figure out exactly what Gibson meant in the note that we found on his body. Search the house. To solve this mystery, we have to think back. Where have we ever heard the name Gibson before? Racking our brains, we finally remember that we recall searching a house formerly owned by a man named Gibson. But this house was located smack dab in the middle of the minefield. We came to the minefield when completing the Wasteland Survival quests for Moira Brown. While here we had to disable the mines and avoid sniper fire from an old man named Arkansas standing in the ruins of a tall building. We left him alive because he was just protecting his own, but now we have to evade his sniper fire again to find Gibson's house in the minefield. Thankfully, his house is really close to the road. Upon arriving at the minefield, if we fast travel here, we can immediately turn left to pick the door to the first house we find. It's distinctive because it has a bloody handprint on it. This is Gibson's house. Inside, we find a dead raider on the ground, and right next to the TV, we find a model of a home. This model is locked with a very hard lock, but if we have the key that we found on Gibson's corpse inside the Capitol Post, we can unlock it. But inside, we're a bit disappointed. We only find 3 Buffout and a small amount of pre-war money and some potato crisps. So it was a little underwhelming. But this model home confirms the fact that this is an elaborate reference to Snatcher. Because in the game, after finding Gibson's corpse, we discovered that the house he was referring to was none other than the model of a home inside his own house. In that game, the model house is a music box, and it serves as a clue to unraveling the primary plot of that game. With that, we finish exploring the plaza, and we solve the mystery of Gibson's house. But now we have this letter about Cheryl. It's clear that this isn't the only one. It is, after all, marked number 1, which means there must be more. In our next episode, we'll travel from point to point in the Capital Wasteland to track down Cheryl. I publish many different videos each and every week, so if you want to make sure you don't miss my next episode about Cheryl, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a brand new shirt in the shop. The game was rigged from the start. This is a great little painting of a certain fellow who likes to sport a checkered jacket. He holds up an important poker chip, and we find his signature gun. You can get this image on shirts in a wide array of colors and in a variety of sizes. It also comes on a bunch of other gear, smartphone cases, mugs, posters, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to tune in soon for my next video.